We're here at the Green Door Tavern in River North with Keith Giles and David Chase to talk about the West Loop and the South Loop. Keith is a principal in Kargil Development and co-founder and owner of Franklin Giles. Currently developing EXO Condominiums and has been involved in a lot of projects in the South Loop. Going back to Filmworks in 1994, I'd say. David Chase is CEO and president of the Thrush Companies, which has been very active in the West Loop. Currently developing 740 Fulton, which is a 14-story condo tower, and also was behind Block X and Block Y, two really big projects in the West Loop, and lives in the West Loop. Still, yes. So to kick things off here, you know, part of our goal is to just determine once and for all which is the better neighborhood. But let's decide what neighborhoods we're talking about. So I just want to ask each of you, what are the boundaries of your neighborhoods? So Keith, what is the South Loop? Can you sort of define the borders?
You know, I would say the South Loop is bordered on the north by Congress, although there's a couple of buildings just north of that. But I would say Congress on the north, the lake on the east, Cermak on the south, although again there's projects that have been built south of Cermak and are being marketed south of Cermak. And on the west, at least on a residential perspective, the river, Chicago River.
All right. I meant to announce earlier, please turn off all cell phones and electronic devices. If you have candy, now's the time to unwrap it. David, the West Loop.
All right. So, you know, going back into the mid-'80s, Thrush was developing in the West Loop, and at that point in time, the eastern boundary was Wacker, and the western boundary was the highway. And on the south was Jackson, and on the north was Randolph. Over the last 10 years, the boundaries have expanded from Wacker on the east to Ashland on the west, the Eisenhower on the south, and Fulton on the north.
All right. Both are sort of new neighborhoods, really. I mean, you don't have to worry about gentrification in a lot of ways, I think, because there weren't many people to be displaced. Is that accurate? But you know, as a Chicagoan, for people who've grown up in Chicago in neighborhoods that are very settled, that have old, you know, parks and old churches with a lot of history and established retail strips, why live in a new neighborhood? I mean, this isn't a West Loop versus South Loop question. This is, you know, open for both of you. Why live in a neighborhood where people are constantly saying, you know, there's going to be a grocery store coming? I mean, now you both have grocery stores, but there was a long period when you both remember when people complained, when's the major grocery store going to be in the neighborhood? When's the shop going to come that I can walk to around the corner? When are the restaurants going to come? Why not live in, you know, Lakeview or Lincoln Park or a more established neighborhood?
Well, at least as it relates to the South Loop, we did our first project in 1994, Filmworks Lofts, and I can tell you that the most common question was, where do I shop for groceries? Because the only place to shop for anything there was at that time, it's now a BP, but at that time it was a standard station, I believe. And
rates are a little higher there.
Right, you could
bread,
get milk and, and candy and cigarettes, and that was about it. And our response was, well, it's coming, and but it's only a 10-minute drive to the Jewel or the Treasure Island. And once the grocery store came, it made a huge difference. But in answer to your question, I think there's people that go to a neighborhood first have a pioneering spirit. You know, they see value, and were able to get value in those days, and see the opportunity to help pioneer a neighborhood and make money while they're doing it, and frankly are not afraid of pioneering. And there's an eclectic group that came down to the South Loop in 1994. The average price per square foot in our first building was $118 a square foot. So they did very well on that project, and so I would say just the pioneering spirit is the reason that people go down first.
What would a unit at Filmworks, I don't know if you've kept track, but what sort of price are the resales?
You know, I don't really know that building in particular, but $250 to $300 a square foot would be my guess.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's a 10 to 13 year difference.
12 years since first deliveries.
Right. All right. David?
Well,
What would you say on that?
We've found a similar experience in the West Loop. Once again, pioneers in that market, just as Keith has been in the South Loop. Buyers who are interested in markets that are emerging are getting in at a lower cost, thus value is emphasized, tend to be patient, tend to be willing to deal with the sparsity of amenities, willing to travel to get them. Block X, when we opened that, we opened at $125 a foot. And today, one of the agents that helps sell that out calls me now and then and tells me, hey, we broke the $300 a foot, or we both broke the $325 a foot. It's just been amazing. So the people who buy into emerging markets early have huge opportunity for value. There's also a sense of exclusivity coming into the market. I moved into the West Loop in 1995. I walked to the park with my dog, and there'd be nobody else hanging out at that park, at Skinner Park, with dogs. There were people hanging out on the benches, generally drunk and asleep. But, you know, now I take the dogs, and there's not only a formal dog park and people throwing frisbees and playing with their dogs, but there's children playing on the swing sets. There are elderly walking through the park. So you go from a neighborhood that was predominantly commercial industrial to what is now predominantly residential. Huge shift in demographics, huge opportunity for value generation. And people who want to maintain that exclusivity, that eclectic attitude, tend to take advantage of the appreciation and may move on to more fringe areas. And that's the beauty of the city redeveloping.
Is it still emerging? Is there still that opportunity you're talking about?
I believe over the next 10 years there'll be, the acceleration I do not believe will be as great from, for instance, from Block X going from 125 to 300 in a matter of 10 years. But you may very well be going from 300 to 500 in 10 years. You know, we're already over 400, 415,
Right.
yeah, on some of our sales at 740 Fulton. So is it conceivable that over the next 10 years the market could go there? I think so. I mean, Keith's already seeing, I think, $600 a foot in the South Loop.
And beyond. I mean, there's
beyond.
$700 a square foot product there, and
Is this mostly Museum Park, or where do you see those kind of prices?
we've gotten prices north of 600 at XO,
You do.
and you know, some of the high-end products with outstanding views. You're going to see that, and you know, there's going to be a lot more buildings built in the South Loop with those, you know, top dollar views. So,
Is it certain parts of the neighborhood, especially? I mean, you know, are there parts that are more emerging than other parts?
yeah, I mean, I would say that east, the more east the buildings are, the more you can command a premium. And Michigan Avenue, you know, South Michigan Avenue, we did a project on 9th and Michigan called 888 South Michigan, and that building was vacant for at least a decade. City sold it. They had a contest, a beauty contest. We were selected as the developer, bought the building, and sold the building out very quickly. When we bought that building, actually before we bought the building, Grant Park in that area was the same parks, the same condition of the parks that David was just suggesting. I think it's, you know, there was overgrown weeds, and the monuments were left unkept. Now it's just a spectacular garden after garden, and really a magnet for people that want to hang out in Grant Park and Millennium Park. It's all connected there. So I'd say Michigan Avenue and anything, you know, east of Michigan Avenue is really going to still see significant appreciation.